Welcome to the City. I'm Anthony Wilson, the Public Information Officer for the City of San Angelo. And joining us today is Amanda Cruz. Amanda is the Deputy Director of the San Angelo Housing Authority, and she's here today to talk about homelessness. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the reason I asked you to be here is because you've been integrally involved in the Homeless Coalition, and you've been down to Tent City many times, and I want to start off by talking about Tent City. From what you saw down there, why was that a situation that was untenable, that couldn't be allowed to continue?
Anytime you concentrate poverty, you're going to run into issues with crime, whether it be violent or drug related, and there towards the end we had a little bit of all of that. When you mix that with living under the bridge and the stress that goes along, it's not going to work. Originally, when Tent City formed, they policed themselves quite well, and it was all right, but all good things come to an end, and proximity to the school, it just couldn't continue.
Also, too, there was a public health and public sanitation problem with not only trash, but human waste getting into the river.
They were using the restroom down in the Reeds, which was getting into our river, and that also is not a good thing to have happen.
So in your mind, did Tent City serve some sort of valuable purpose by helping to raise the profile of homelessness here in our community?
Absolutely. Out of sight, out of mind is a real thing, and when you don't see it, it makes it feel like it doesn't exist. And so that opened the city's eyes to the fact that we did have big city issues going on here in our small town.
So obviously we no longer have a Tent City down there by the Concho River. What happened to the people who were living there?
A little bit of everything. Some of them are utilizing the Salvation Army. We've been able to put a few up in lodging until their housing voucher comes up. Some are still homeless on the streets in more discreet places in San Angelo. So they're a little bit of everywhere at this point.
So talk to us about those different situations. So the ones who are at the Salvation Army, I can assume that's actually what we want for them, is we want them to be in housing, and we want them hopefully working on whatever issues they might have.
Yes, we are trying to do as much case management out of the Salvation Army as possible. And so we go there, we assess them. If the Salvation Army is not ideal to their situation, whether they have children or other maybe elderly, disabled, we will pay to house them at the lodge until we can get their housing voucher, but we want everyone to start out at the Salvation Army.
And you mentioned about putting some up in lodging until their public housing vouchers come through. How does that work?
I'm partnered with Bob Solis and his department, his wonderful staff, Chris, and we basically just vet them, and if there's someone that I feel that should be in lodging, I make the call and they set up the transaction to make it happen. They're paying for it at this point.
So tell us one of the success stories of someone who previously lived in Tent City.
We've had one that's come full circle, and I'm not going to give his name, but within a month's time he went from living under the bridge. We physically moved his things to the lodge, and then once we found him a unit that he liked, we physically moved him there. We partnered with Rush Street Ministries, and we got his apartment completely set up for him to go, and he's super happy, and that was a great story. He's thankful, and he's become family. My peer counselors will have him over at Thanksgiving and Christmas. We check on him all the time. We're still case managing him, and he's doing really well. We're working hard still to get him service connected in other areas, but he's housed permanently, and that's exciting.
You mentioned peer counselors. Who are those folks?
Okay, so we've put together a group of people. We're calling them peer counselors. It's a pilot program, and there is no template for it, so we're sort of winging it as we go, but it's just a group of us that have gotten together. We assess needs, and it's not what you know, but who you know, and we know a lot of people, so we just network them. We make the calls to the social service agencies. We've provided transportation. We've solicited donations, whether it be household items or bus passes, and we're just making it happen. What seems simple to you and I is not simple to them, so we're just that extra, we're the hands and feet there bridging those gaps.
And so I assume these folks are part of the Homeless Coalition. How has the Homeless Coalition been effective in dealing with the issues that our homeless here in San Angelo face?
Well, we're finally all in the same boat and rowing the same direction. It's a group of knowledge professionals that work at the various social service agencies here in town. And again, it's not what you know, but who you know. And we know a lot of people. So we're all networking together and working hard to bridge those gaps. And as long as we keep doing that, we'll continue to be successful.
So let's say there's a homeless person here in San Angelo. They come in contact with one of the agencies involved in the Homeless Coalition. How does that work from there? How do they sort of get directed to wherever it is that they need to go?
A lot of it comes down to the peer counselor. Once we've assessed their needs, we are trying to do one peer counselor to one person or one family. And we just create a list. It's a tangible list that the person can hold on to. And as we mark those things off the list and assess needs, it builds their confidence. And so really the first step is going to be to assess them, create a needs list, and then just start marketing from there.
So there's a myriad of agencies that are contributing to this effort, too numerous to name. We don't want to leave anybody out.
Right.
But what are some of the issues that they help these folks with?
We have mental health services, counseling. We see a lot of grief due to loss, whether it be a death or loss of a marriage, loss of employment. So grief counseling, drug and alcohol rehabilitation, and then of course all of the housing needs, whether it be the actual rental assistance or food, clothing, household items to get them lined out. So we got a lot of good stuff here in San Angelo, and most of it's underutilized because a lot of people don't know it exists.
And so do the agencies charge for their services, or typically are these services that are provided at no cost to the person?
Most of the services are free, whether it be by state, local, or federal funding. And so the biggest hurdle would be waiting lists for some of the things, but most of it is free to the consumer. It's there to help for low income.
As I mentioned, you made a lot of trips down to Tent City, and you're still working with a lot of these folks. What are some of the common issues and maybe challenges that they're facing?
Well, there's quite a few. The biggest is probably substance abuse, which what I've found is meth is the drug of choice there, and that's a bad one. Once someone goes down that trail, that's a big challenge. There's the mental health situations, whether it be diagnosed or undiagnosed, and mostly untreated. The physical ailments from living in poverty, lack of access to health care, physically living under the bridge, that'll hurt you, and then lack of knowledge, lack of transportation, lack of skill set. A lot of times they do need that case management to hold their hand through because they're so overwhelmed, and it's not just as easy as deciding to get a job. There's a lot that goes into that.
So talk a little bit about case management. How critical is that to helping these folks reintegrate back into a society and to regain some self-sufficiency?
It's crucial because, like I said, it's overwhelming. I've been blessed to get to do this because it's opened my eyes. Going to each and every social service agency, we all have our own paperwork. That's overwhelming. Sometimes it's overwhelming for me to keep up with all of it for a family. And so, as we go, we get to teach them how to make the phone calls, how to schedule the appointments, how to keep up with when their appointments are, transportation. All of that is so overwhelming, even for me on some days, let alone for someone who's been in poverty for a very long time. That can give them a feeling of hopelessness. And so we're there to encourage them, not just to do for them, but to teach them, to let them cry on our shoulder if they need to, and just be that a friend, a peer, a mentor.
So it sounds like left to their own devices, it would be a very difficult challenge for them to regain self-sufficiency of and by themselves.
Very difficult because it's overwhelming, and what I've noticed is whenever they get to the point where they don't know where to start, they don't start anywhere. They just kind of sit down and let the world crash down around them. Once we start marking things off the list, they get that self-esteem, confidence back, and then they can start doing it on their own. Is
there any lack of agencies to provide the sort of social help that these folks need here in San Angelo?
I need a lot more dedicated peer counselors, let's say that. It can be a full-time job in itself. There are some gaps that need to be bridged here in San Angelo, but there are wheels in motion to make that happen. I don't want to really dive too far into that, but we are working hard to bridge those gaps so that people don't slip through the cracks. One of the biggest things is waiting list and lack of availability. Whenever someone needs housing or they need something else, they need it today. And if they have to get on a waiting list, that can be discouraging and they'll give up, and sometimes we'll lose them. And so that's what we're trying to do in every social service field, is eliminate some of the wait if we can.
Now, I know occasionally you will encounter someone who says, I don't want any help, and they're more interested in continuing the lifestyle that they do currently have. At that point, what's the approach?
For me personally, and what I would like for my peer counselors, is to understand the psychology behind that. That addiction or that mental health condition is telling them that they don't need our help in some cases. And sometimes they're afraid. Sometimes the system has failed them. They don't trust us. They think that we're up to no good or there's strings attached. And so my approach is to love them and support them. Hey, this is who I am. This is how you can get in touch with me. These are the services I can provide. And not judge them, because they receive a lot of judgment. And you would be amazed at the members of Tent City. They've refused our help so far, but they still call us regularly to check in. This is where I'm at. This is what I'm doing. And we're just there to listen to them. And we'll tell them again, you know, we can help you in these ways. And then we wait till the next phone call. So I think the biggest thing is consistency. Don't be judgmental, and just be patient, which can be really hard to do when you build relationships. We grow to love these people, so we want them to do well, but we have to realize that it's in their time and not ours. And I think that's the key to bridging those gaps and building those relationships. Once they trust us, they're more likely to accept our assistance.
You know, Tent City was almost a stone's throw away from the Salvation Army shelter.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that more of those folks didn't seek that environment versus under a bridge somewhere?
There's quite a few issues. One of the biggest is there's misconceptions about how long they can stay there. Or do they have to pay? For some that are struggling with mental health or substance abuse problems, that's too confining. You know, you've got to be there by a certain time. The doors lock. You have to leave by a certain time, and then you know, you're kind of stuck all day without a place to stay. We don't have storage capacity there, so they can't bring all of their belongings there and keep them safe. So for a lot of people, it was easier to live under the bridge because they had their tent, which they referred to as their house. All their stuff was safe. They didn't have the rules, and for a lot of people who are struggling, rules are hard to follow.
If people want to help the homeless, what are the best options for them to do so?
Donate to the local agencies that provide immediate assistance to the homeless, whether it be the Salvation Army. You can pay for people's night stay. The Rush Street Ministries is an amazing place, or the food places. Anyone who serves food regularly, and there's quite a few, so I don't want to leave anyone out. Donate to those places. That way, you know, they're already structured to help, and they have other services they provide at the same time, and so that's just the best way to go.
What are some of the unintended outcomes of simply handing a homeless person money or food or clothing?
It creates an enabling type situation. You know, our goal is to actually get to the root of the problem and create a permanent solution, not just band-aid it. So by giving them food or whatever where they're at, they no longer have to go search for help. And so then they're less likely to have their needs met fully. And so it's better to give to the agencies that are structured to help instead of handing outright.
What do you think is going to be key to continuing the good efforts so far of the Homeless Coalition?
Consistency and dedication. If we start something, we have to finish it. And this has been a very rewarding and also at times discouraging task to take on, because like I said, we grow to love these people, and when they don't quite, you know, follow through, it can be sad or devastating. And so just consistency, continue at it even when there are failures. You know, you can't fix or change everyone, but just keep at it.
Do you think we'll ever cure homelessness here in San Angelo?
I would like to hope so, and I'm going to keep doing my best to try, but I also have to realize that not everyone is ready yet, and that's okay. To me, that's the biggest message that, you know, to put out there is don't judge when someone's not ready. It's okay if they're not. We'll be here when they are ready, and hopefully we can create a level of awareness in the community where people know what help is available in San Angelo, where it's at, how to go about utilizing it, and then when they're ready, they know where to go to get the help.
And so if someone is wanting to plug into that network of help, what's the best way for them to do so?
Contacting me is probably the best at this point, either by email or my work phone, and we can provide that. And they can let me know what areas they want to help in or what areas they need help in, and we will get them linked up and go from there.
We've been talking with Amanda Cruz. She is the Deputy Director for the San Angelo Housing Authority, and we hope you'll join us for the next episode of The City.